what are the key points that a surveyor, particularly one starting out on their own, is trying to build their brand and their business as best they can? What are the key communication points? What are the key things that lead, aside from doing a good job and producing a good report, that lead to a really good customer experience?
To work out what that is, you've got to look at every single touch point a customer's going to have with you, from inquiry all the way through to report. And that'll typically look like initial inquiry in terms of asking for a quote and you getting back to them promptly, asking for terms, then being sent out in a timely manner, clear, easy to follow. Then after terms have been signed, a clear, next step expectation, whether that's booking the appointment, please pay, whatever that is, letting you know that the appointment's been booked or tentatively booked, confirming you've been, uploading the report. There's all these touch points. They take time, unless obviously you automate them through systems like ours. But regardless of how you do that, you want to make sure you've got those touch points in place, and that's what keeps the customer engaged and knowing what's going on. The flip side is they're also at the same time dealing with potentially their mortgage lender or mortgage broker, the solicitor. And if you've got 3 different parties that aren't keeping you in the loop, it's just another stress. Whereas at least if the surveyor's going, right, this is happening at this point, it's happened. And setting the expectations is one less stress out of that overall picture, and it just keeps
regular touch points. Yeah, really critical. Ultimately, how do you engender the highest response rate when it comes to asking for reviews?
You know what? The best conversion in terms of actually getting a review, from how many times you requested a review, the best time to ask is on the post-survey call. Most surveyors, obviously it's not a set rule, but the vast majority of surveyors, they will obviously have a post-survey call with that client to explain the findings in the report. That's kind of part of the, service offering that everyone would, normally give. Asking for a review while you've just explained the whole report to someone and they are clear on the understanding, they've asked any question they need to ask, that is usually the best time in terms of conversion. So if you ask and you send the link straight out, the likelihood is you are going to have a review come in. If you leave it, people just get distracted. It's normal. You move on to the rest of the house buying process and you forget. You might be lucky enough that some do come back, but actually that post-survey conversation, we've always found that is the best time. So there's only so many times that we can follow up someone and ask for a review, but if the surveyor does it on the call or just off the back of the call, as simple as an email saying, great talking to you, just to break down, these were the main points. Any questions, please do not hesitate to give me a call. Can I ask you to leave us a review? Here's a link.
Yeah, I completely agree. At that point, the customer they're most happy, they're most motivated, and you've just dealt with them. So as soon as something comes through, they're likely to click on it, or much more likely to click on it and fill it in. 6 days later, they'll remember they felt good, but the motivation level's just not there. There's other things going on, so it just doesn't happen. So I completely agree with timing on that.
Maybe a period where the company's slightly more mature and has a bit of a reputation, is established and is accredited on the RICS surveyor, inevitable avenue to drive additional surveys will be looking at panels. And Jemma, or either of you could fill this question, but let's start with Jemma. How do you go about setting yourself up for success with panels? How do you evaluate which panels you might want to join? How do you make sure that you're positioned attractively for them?
I can only reference non-lending panels because we do not work, none of our clients work with lender panels. So it is only the non-lender panels that we work with a lot. But generally speaking, they will all have a certain criteria. You might have the one who obviously has a different criteria altogether. So it's going through obviously different panels, seeing what you could actually apply to, and then working through the process and seeing what you get back. A good thing to do from the offset really is actually asking each of them, the ones that you would qualify for an estimate of what jobs you might get and what the fees for those jobs would be. Because private jobs will always pay better than panel jobs. It is part and parcel. That's not to say that you shouldn't have panel jobs activated at all, because I'm a big believer that you should have a mix of both from a cash flow perspective, but also from a security perspective. When you have gaps, that is, it is a perfect thing to have active. And obviously, you don't have to guarantee a set date. So obviously, if a private job, comes in that takes priority, then it's just going to have to go to the next day. Obviously, as long as it's not yet confirmed with the house buyer. But generally speaking, obviously, private jobs, you tend to get paid before the job. Panel jobs tend to pay a lump sum every month, which for someone starting out is quite handy to have a mix of the two going on. And also just ensures that there's no empty slot. until the private jobs are in a position where they overtake the entire calendar, and obviously there is no more capacity. But it definitely does help to try them, to have a good relationship with them, and whenever there's any possibility of activating them, do it.
Explore that relationship. Matt, do you feel similarly towards them? Is that your experience of it?
Yeah, I'd agree with the sentiment. Ultimately, you want a mix of leads coming from different sources. Like anything, you don't want all your eggs in one basket, because if something changes, then you've got no business suddenly. It's the same whether you're on a comparison site and then they change the number of people in the listings, or some much better competitor comes in and suddenly you're not performing, or I don't know, a referral partner of one agency decides to start referring to somebody else. You've just lost your entire revenue base. So you need a mix. I suppose with the panels, their challenge is when they're quieter, they're going to keep more of the jobs for their own team, so they'll be paneling less out. So you need to be aware of that aspect of it. But when they're busy, it's a nice bread and butter work coming through to keep you busy and have funds through the door. I suppose in terms of getting in front of the panels, there is an element of having to build up your history as a firm. I don't think many will take on a brand new surveying firm that's got no history of having provided a good service, and you're not just sort of 21-star reviews. They want to see a bit of history behind you, and you know what you're doing, and that will come with all the challenges of the right PI cover and all that type of stuff. But yeah, I think overall I agree with Jemma. It's right. It's having a good mix, so that as the market changes, you're not reliant on one source.
Matt, you mentioned there, ups and downs from various external factors. One thing that I'd imagine for some of your customers, Jemma, is a concern, albeit you will no doubt help them manage it, is the kind of seasonal ups and downs. Inevitably, the property market has its flow. How do you go about helping? What advice would you give to customers who are thinking about how to smooth their demand across the kind of seasonal period?
Lower expenses as much as possible during the year. Make the most of every single slot you can during the year, because come the December period, for the prime example, things do drop. Unless you're at a stage where you're a complete referral, things just come through the door organically. If you're relying on lead gen or even on panels, everyone will have less work and you will be affected. So take holidays in December. Summer warm in December if you have to. But that's, really, if you're assuming someone is, obviously working for themselves, then you really want to try and get the most in when the work is there, and perhaps on the quieter times, just that's when you take a break.
Yeah, I completely agree. Particularly if you've started to employ, you don't want all your team booked for holiday at the busiest period when you could be maximising turnover. You want them to be off when the market's down, because you don't need the capacity in the business. So you might as well have that holiday cost when it's not affecting turnover. I think that's the main thing, planning. And also the other one I was going to mention, the make hay while the sun shines fallacy, which I've talked about so many times. There's plenty of people when they start out, and I completely get it, and fall into the trap multiple times, I've got to maximize the amount of work I do when it's busy and just work all hours of the day. And then I'm going to panic when it's gone quiet and do everything I can to do, just email people and try and convert leads, and not actually building time to stop and rest and work on the business. You've got to have that balance, and just allow for the fact that it's not going to be permanently the same busyness.
We tell everyone when they first, whatever time of the year they're starting, because obviously some will have worked with bigger firms, they know things are going to drop a bit, some might not have, and the first thing we tell everyone, just be aware that in December things do drop a bit, so you need to kind of be prepared for that time of the year. And without failure, come December, my calendar's half what it normally is. Yes, that is exactly what we were talking about. So really, the earlier in the year you start out, the more reviews and things you want to get in. So the example that we were talking about earlier, one of our clients who is who does 4 jobs a week, very small area, but it's all referral. He was a prime example of someone who did not have any issues come last Christmas. He was fully booked from the start of December into the middle of January. His waiting list is huge. If anything, he loses jobs because there is no availability. But it's hard to get someone in that position. And it's not necessarily going to happen within a year in some areas. Obviously, you have a lot more competition than others. So I think that's kind of what you want to aim towards, but that process can take a time.